Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. Well, since this will be the last weather video I'll get to provide you in the month of March, let's just take a quick recap of what this early spring weather pattern has looked like. Now, just to piggyback on what we talked about in last week's video, this is now the last 30 days looking at surface temperature anomalies or differences from normal. Now, this is going to be a critical part of this upcoming forecast because last week we saw some pretty substantial changes in the overall flow of the jet stream, which suggested that going into the month of April, we were going to break this pattern down. Well, over the weekend, brand new model updates came in and said, nope, this is going to go right back over to what we've been seeing, which, as you've been looking at here, has been a very warm start to the year. In some parts of the Carolinas here, seeing anywhere between 4 and 7 degrees above average during this last month time period. What's interesting, though, is the overall precipitation pattern. And just again, to show you this, we've seen overall throughout much of the state of North Carolina, slightly drier than average conditions. Now, most of us are going to see this and not really be able to tell much of a difference from normal. But when we just compare, we see that we're sitting at about 80% of average on precipitation. That's been basically because of the trajectory of the last several systems that have gone through, and the most recent one is showing us that again. Looking over the weekend, we had a very potent system that came out of the midsection of the United States, and just like the last few systems, it has very quickly pulled to the north and east, leaving very weak frontal boundaries that have moved through parts of the Carolinas, and as a result, not given us much precipitation. But this storm system that went through here produced a lot of severe weather and even some snow on the backside of it. So we're going to give us just a quick view of what's happened around the country before we drill back in to the weather patterns affecting North Carolina here. Now, as that system went through, much of the midsection of the United States saw incredibly strong winds over the last couple of days. When I put it all together and just look at maximum wind gusts, just look at how powerful this was. This is the 40-mile-an-hour color up to the 60-mile-an-hour color, and you can see with that system pulling through extremely windy conditions, and some of those strong winds came from some thunderstorms. I just want to show you one of them real quickly. You see, back on Saturday, while much of the attention was up in like Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa, on the southern side of the storm system, there was one cell right here. Kind of look down there in the bottom left-hand corner of your image. That storm cell you see popping up there on our infrared satellite temperatures kind of was the showstopper of the day. As I play this forward, that storm system moved out of southeastern Arkansas right up here toward southwestern Arkansas down here, all the way to northeastern Arkansas. And as it went through, it produced a very powerful supercell thunderstorm. Now take a look at this. There's a neat lesson in this. This is the backside of that supercell, so the hook echo is sitting right back here. But if you notice, right around the town of Jonesboro, which I'm sure you saw in the news this weekend, what I circled there is a region of very, relatively lighter radar echoes. In other words, weaker echoes, meaning less precipitation. Now, what is this? We call this the Bounded Weak Echo Region, BWER. And what I see when I see a donut hole like that on a radar image such as this one is that the updraft was so strong that it was throwing the precipitation above the radar beam. That's why you have this bounded, looks like a circle, weak, relatively weak, echo region. And when we look at it on Doppler velocity, the mesocyclone, in other words, the rotation of that storm, was quite violent. And I'm going to show you what it looked like here. On the left, Adam Harden shared this video widely and allowed us all to kind of reproduce it here, showing you the tornado that went through Jonesboro. At its widest, it was 600 yards wide, and the National Weather Service released its rating as an EF3, which puts its wind speeds at 140 miles an hour. Pretty powerful and destructive tornado here. Now, on the other side over here, Tyler Grunstrom also released this for us to show. And I just want to fast forward to right about here to show you the chassis of a vehicle that was destroyed by this tornado. I don't know where the body is in this image, but it has been ripped off. And this shows you what 140 mile an hour winds can do. And if you get a chance later today, I want you to go over to Twitter and go to Jeff Piotrowski's Twitter feed, because he has a very interesting video of where the tornado crossed some train tracks while there was a train sitting on it. And on one side, it flipped the train one direction. On the other side, it flipped it the other way. It's just a very interesting way to kind of see the destructive power of these thunderstorms. Now, moving on from here, let's also take a look at what this did to the midsection of the United States in terms of severe weather reports. We had 512 in total, 24 of which were tornadoes, but 270 72 reports of hail. And a product I'm going to show a lot more throughout this upcoming summer, so I just want to give you a quick flavor for it here, is this one. It shows maximum estimated hail size. And what you're getting out of this are the streaks across the country where hail bigger than 1/4 inch was detected. And this was a pretty active storm system. Again, 500 reports of severe weather. Well, what are we on the lookout for this week? Well, that main frontal boundary from that weekend storm system is producing some very light rain off the coast early this morning. What we need to watch is this shortwave right here, and then eventually what this bigger shortwave that's coming through the northwest is going to do. Because the one that you see I just drew the line through will eventually be moving its way over toward the Carolinas by Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning, increasing our chances of precipitation. Thankfully, not a severe weather threat coming out of that circulation. So what are we looking at? Well, here's kind of a labeled map here looking over the next 5 days of total accumulated precipitation. We've got a couple of systems to watch across the country, but the question is, how do they progress toward the east? And the only one that I think we need to be mostly concerned about is the first one starting off here on Monday, progressing toward the Carolinas later on this week. Now, quick bit of information about this map. Much of the eastern Corn Belt, Great Lakes states, getting a drier week ahead of them. The system that's pulling through the north central plains, a lot of this is going to be snow on the back side here. So we're putting down some snow where there wasn't any moving into this. Now, is that going to really increase spring flooding threat? No, not at this point, but it's something to keep an eye out on in the midsection of the United States. So let's take a closer look at what we're anticipating. I'm going to stretch this out a couple more days, take you all the way out to next Sunday evening. So this is about a week's worth of precipitation here. We can see that after the system pulls through Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, we're not anticipating too much more rainfall. So in general, we're seeing lighter amounts here. Most of the state will see precipitation amounts recorded under 3/4 inch of rainfall in total. And like I said, a lot of that coming Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Now, this is where we need to have a more serious discussion. Last week, we were watching in the middle and end of the week about what the time period of April 2nd through April 9th was going to look like. That was the old week 2 forecast shown to you over here on the left. At that time, and I brought this up in last week's video for North Carolina as well, we knew that the jet stream was thinking about dipping into a trough here, at least the models were advertising that, building into a broad ridge over the west, giving us upper level convergence here and a trough that developed over the east. And that was going to hopefully dry some things out for a big section of the country. Well, things have now changed. Here's the brand new day 4 through 10 pattern update. And what it is we've now switched over to more troughing in the western part of the United States. And that's going to really help pull Gulf of Mexico moisture back out. And while still through April 9th, we see on average drier than normal conditions. Remember, it's still going to precipitate, but drier than normal conditions for the Carolinas. Things are continuing to shift as we pull our way into April. And I think we're going to be seeing a wetter month compared to average for North and South Carolina. Now let's just take a look at the bigger implications of this overall shift. And I want to keep this broad scale for the whole United States so that we can keep perspective on that. What this is going to do is this is really going to tighten up any sort of window we had for field work in the north central part of the United States. With the snow coming in here and the increased chances of rainfall as we move toward the end of the week here in the western Corn Belt, just know that that's going to be going on. Any sort of long stretch of drier days, well, the hope of that has been dashed away for that part of the country. And as we look down south, systems are easily going to pull Gulf of Mexico moisture out and pull it across the southern region. And we're going to work on this drought out west a little bit more here with some extra precipitation coming in the week 2 in California. So keep that broad scale perspective. Here's the other implication of this. This was the old day 10 through 15 forecast, which was valid April 5th through the 10th. Well, that time period is now day 6 through 11. Now look at this. Remember, we were thinking ridge out west, trough over the east. So see the cooler pattern I had forecast maybe showing up for the Carolinas as we moved into the first full week of April, really into the second week as well. Well, the models over the weekend made a massive flip on this. I watched 5 straight days of forecast. That's 20 separate model runs advertise the pattern you see over here on the left. Come Friday night through Saturday and Sunday, everything switched over to what you got over here on the right. And again, that's a pattern that dips here, builds back into a ridge. And if you think you've seen this before, this is what we've seen for, well, since the beginning of January. So the pattern did not break down. Now here's the cool bit of meteorology behind this. What is the big thing that changed? The big thing that changed was our global wind anomaly value. We're looking at the speed of the atmosphere compared to the rotation of the Earth. It slowed down, which means things get more bunched up. And what that did was strengthen this ridge first and foremost. That shoved this trough, which was once forecast to be over Scandinavia, now pushed it north into the Arctic. That allows this trough to advance farther into the North Atlantic. That then dug a trough out in the western United States, allowed this ridge to push toward Alaska, and watch the pattern, what it does. It goes into one omega setup here, that's an omega pattern, and then a second omega pattern there. And when the global winds slow down, we get more of a blocking, more stagnant pattern. This is what we used to think was going to happen. This is the new forecast that just came out. And those are the major differences from you having a cool start to April to now having a ridge in place. So with that, here's one last cool thing I want to show you. As the pattern blocks itself up, you're looking here at a map valid for, this would be Wednesday evening, looking at mean sea level pressure, so sea level pressure here, compared to average. But we're looking at it, we're looking statistically at the standard deviation. Now, I know that we've heard a lot about statistics as of late, especially as we're watching this COVID-19 virus spread quickly, and a lot of the social media, a lot of the news is reporting statistical evidence of it. Well, let's come back to meteorology. This high pressure cell that you're seeing sitting here north of the Hudson Bay may have a central pressure to it that approaches 1,070 millibars. That is 5 standard deviations above the mean. And for those of you that have studied a little statistics, you know that that is near the very tail end of the distribution, and we're approaching record-setting pressure. This is what happens when the pattern gets blocked up. Okay, some details now. Today on Monday, severe weather threat is west of the Carolinas, and as we work our way into Tuesday, it's going to be primarily confined to the south here. So we're talking about Georgia and Alabama. That precipitation coming through looks something like this. By Monday night into early Tuesday morning, spreading toward the Appalachian Mountains, and then throughout the day on Tuesday, getting over toward North and South Carolina. So if we just take it right about here, this is 3 a.m. Tuesday morning. So we're going to see the light precipitation spread through early Tuesday morning in the western half of the state. And then as we work our way through the day on Tuesday, that's going to be our soggier day with the heavier precipitation coming in the afternoon and evening. So as that moves out, okay, we're going to let that move out here by Wednesday morning. There might be enough cold air on the backside of it to get some snow in the Appalachian Mountains, but it's going to be relatively high elevation. Now to see where we're going to go after that, let's go over to the European model. We'll pause it right here. This is now Wednesday afternoon. Now notice this, Wednesday afternoon and evening, getting into Thursday morning, afternoon and evening, getting into Friday morning, afternoon and evening. We have dry days coming up here after Tuesday, but will be a little bit cooler than it is to start off the week. When's our next chance of precipitation? Well, this is Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon and evening, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening. It may not be until Sunday evening that we get our next chance at precip here in North Carolina. So we're going to have to wait for that system that comes out of the northwest to fully develop in the central United States and then get toward us at the end of our weekend here. So that's why I showed you overall we have relatively drier conditions after Tuesday's precipitation event. Now what about beyond that? Now that you've seen the models adjust, what is week 2? Well, over here on the left, I have the GFS, and over here on the right, I have the European model. And now we see that pattern pulling that Gulf of Mexico moisture out as the trough builds in like this and runs in that direction. Both models show the same thing happening here. And the question is, does this really increase our precipitation chances for North Carolina? Latest model evidence suggests it does as we now get into and past the first full week of April. Now temperatures. Today's going to be our warmest day here on Monday. Temperatures easily climbing into the upper 70s. But as we play this one forward, let's see how things change throughout the week. So here's Monday's departure from normal. So we're looking at differences from normal here. Tuesday, the cool down comes in with the precipitation. So now we might be 5 to 10 degrees cooler than average. That lasts into the day on Wednesday. See this out here? Maybe 10 to 15 degrees cooler than average. But we're going to start to see things moderate for Thursday, into Friday, and Saturday. And finally, by our chances of rain on Sunday, we could go back over to near average temperatures overall. So warm start, cool middle, relatively average finish to the week. Beyond that, though, you've already seen this. This is the new day 5 through 10. This gets us out to April 9th, and we now see the return to near average to above average temperatures during a time period we had previously forecast to show up with a cooler bias. And going all the way out to day 11 through 15, which gets us to mid-April, The GFS on the left, the European on the right, you can see excellent model agreement here. It looks as though we're not able to fully break down the pattern that we had seen so much to start this year. Okay? To finish this up, longer term, this was just released on Friday. This is the new outlook for April 8th through May 8th. We continue to see the pattern advertising wetter than normal conditions stretching from Texas all the way up the East Coast, and we continue to see the pattern advertising warmth across the same section of the United States. So even though we've seen recently some model fluctuations, the European weekly forecast, which is the long range one I'm showing you here, has been pretty steady with this. So we'll keep an eye on it to see if this is the true trajectory of these systems that come through and what that will mean for our precipitation patterns here in North Carolina. Last thing I want to talk about, South America. We've noticed that over the last month or so, things have really dried out in southern Brazil. So the areas I'm specifically talking about, I'll draw on the map on the left. This is Mato Grosso do Sul, this is Paraná, and this is Rio Grande do Sul. Now the map on the right shows us something called an evaporative stress index. We were on the left looking at subsoil moisture, so major deficits there. But the surface has been dealing with strong evaporation in the southern part of Brazil. Now, how do we interpret this? So whenever you see high evaporative stress index values, that means there's a lot of moisture to evaporate. So where it has been wet in this section of Brazil, those numbers are higher. Where it has been dry, there is less moisture to evaporate, hence the lower numbers on the color spectrum. And this is where we've been seeing most of our precipitation stresses in South America. It's been southern Brazil. So they've backed off on total soybean production. They've backed off on total full season corn and safrinha corn production because of the troubles in southern Brazil. Meanwhile, where we're growing our safrinha crops here for cotton and corn, things are looking very good in northern and central Brazil. Even though over the next week they show up drier there, that's not substantial, okay? Where it's dry down here over the next week and in week 2, that's where we're dealing with the critical moisture stresses in southern Brazil. All right, I wanted to show you that South American perspective and give you some ideas on these model trends, but with that, we'll wrap it up. I look forward to talking to you in April. Have a good one. Thank you.